A dog is running straight at a tank, not away from it, not lost, trained for it. In the next few seconds, steel, fire, and instinct collide, and one of the darkest ideas of World War II becomes real. This sounds like a war rumor. It isn't. The Soviet military built a real system for this, not just a few desperate men, a system with units, rules, ranges, trucks, and paperwork. And the strangest part is not that it happened. It's how organized it was. Dogs were already used in the war for serious jobs: search, carrying messages, hauling supplies, and mine work. But in the Soviet Union, one role went much further. Some dogs were trained to destroy tanks. Imperial War Museums describes them as an extreme Soviet wartime weapon, with explosives strapped to their backs and a trigger designed to detonate under a vehicle. Tanks were terror on tracks, fast, loud, hard to stop. In 1941 and 1942, the Red Army was fighting for survival. And when anti-tank defenses failed, commanders reached for anything that might slow steel. The dogs were one answer, a brutal one. But here's the first twist. This idea was not invented in panic. A July 1941 Soviet memo says trials had already been run in 1939 and 1940. It describes testing with a dog carrying an anti-tank charge, and even says an MS-1 tank was destroyed in trials. The memo also says the method had been judged effective enough to keep developing. This was not a last-minute fantasy. It had already been tested. The device was simple and terrifying. A charge strapped to the dog's body, a lever on top. The idea was that the dog would dive under the front of a tank. The lever would strike the underside. The trigger would fire. In one diagram, the charge is listed at about 4.5 kilograms. It was war engineering at its most cold-blooded. The same memo says 3,000 anti-tank pouches had already been produced before the German invasion. Think about that. Not one sketch, not one prototype, thousands. Someone approved budgets, someone assigned factories, someone filed this under military planning. That is what makes this story feel unreal. It was fully administrative. Then, the war closes in. A Western Front order dated October 14th, 1941, sends tank destroyers with dogs toward key sectors near Moscow, Mozhaisk, Volokolamsk, and other threatened areas. The order is short, direct, no drama in the wording. But behind every line is a handler holding a leash and waiting for tanks. And this is where the story gets darker. The handler has to wait. Close, very close. Then release the dog and stay in the fight. That means the men using this weapon were not just trainers. They were infantry under fire, making a choice in seconds, in smoke, with tanks coming at them. In 1942, the Soviets wrote formal instructions for using anti-tank dogs in combat. And the language is chilling because it is so normal. It treats the dogs as an auxiliary weapon in anti-tank defense. Not a one-off trick, a weapon category with doctrine, with command structure, with battlefield roles. The 1942 instructions lay out the unit organization. One anti-tank dog company with 81 dogs, 3 platoons, each platoon split into squads of 9. That is not chaos. That is a system built to be deployed, replaced, and used again. Even the command relationships are specified. Companies and platoons attached to infantry divisions as reinforcement. The same manual gives release distance, up to 200 meters, with 100 to 150 meters described as the effective range if used correctly. Think about what that means. You do not release the dog from safety. You wait until the tank is close enough to feel, close enough to hear the tracks over your own breathing. The manual also lists what the soldier carries: the dog, an automatic rifle, an anti-tank grenade, and incendiary bottles. After releasing the dog, he keeps fighting as part of the squad. That detail matters. This was not send dog and retreat. It was fight, release, survive if you can, then report back for another dog. One of the most disturbing details in the manual is how routine the maintenance sounds. It says, dogs must be trained and fed correctly. It says, units should be pulled from the front every 10 days for training. It even says, a division commander should provide one working tank, preferably a captured one, for practice. This weapon needed upkeep like any other. The instructions even assign mobility. 2 Gaz AA trucks should be provided so a platoon can be moved fast to a threatened sector. The Doctrine treats the dog platoon as a mobile anti-tank reserve. And there's another rule that says a lot. In the offensive, putting them in the first echelon is called senseless, because losses would be too high. Urban combat gets its own section. The manual recommends placing squads, so each squad covers a street. It even describes good positions, solid buildings, half basements, and T-intersections where dogs can be sent left, right, or forward. This is the uncanny part. Someone sat down and wrote city tactics for explosive dogs, block by block. Then the manual gets brutally practical. Deep snow, over about 30 centimeters, limits use. In winter, the dogs are mostly for roads or wind-cleared ground. That one detail tells you this was no legend. Legends do not care about snow depth. Real Doctrine does. Real Doctrine worries about terrain, visibility, and whether a dog can even reach a tank. There is one more twist in the 1942 instructions. They even plan to use anti-tank dogs with partisans in the enemy rear. Small groups, in forests, especially in summer, against tank columns on roads. The manual talks about ambush spacing and releasing the dogs when the lead tank reaches the last soldier in line. It is a full battlefield script. You may have heard the famous story. The dogs were trained on Soviet tanks, smelled the wrong fuel in battle, and ran back to their own side. That story spread everywhere, but the archival material complicates it. A Soviet memo describes pre-war trials with an older MS-1 tank, and Tank Archives notes this undercuts the common diesel training tank version. Another reason to be careful with the fuel myth. Tank Archives also notes that mass-produced German tanks used gasoline engines, not diesel. So the simple diesel smell caused everything story does not hold up. But confusion in battle was still real. Noise, fire, smoke, panic, and moving armor can break any training, human or animal. Imperial War Museums summarizes the result clearly. Many anti-tank dog attacks performed badly. Some dogs became confused, and some even detonated near their own handlers. German troops learned fast and began shooting dogs on sight. This is the collapse of the idea in real time. Doctrine meeting battlefield chaos. But the story does not end with total failure. Because inside Soviet records, there are moments that look like grim success. An October 1st, 1942 report to General Chuikov says the 28th Independent Dog Tank Destroyer Group had 202 men and 202 dogs, and claims the group destroyed or damaged 30 enemy tanks while fighting in Stalingrad's defense. The report is real. The numbers are the report's claim. The same Stalingrad report describes one specific fight. It says that on September 13, 1942, a group of 20 men led by Senior Sergeant F.E. Kryukov fought under constant bombing against tanks and infantry. It claims 13 tanks and a large group of vehicles were destroyed, and says Kryukov's group died but completed the mission. That is not propaganda cinema. That is the language of a battlefield report. Tank Archives also notes Kryukov was posthumously awarded the Order of the Red Banner. This is the contradiction at the heart of the whole story. On the tactical level, Some units reported real kills and real bravery. On the wider level, the method remained unreliable, costly, and brutal. Both things can be true at the same time. And that is the final turn. The Soviets abandoned anti-tank dogs as a frontline method, but war dogs did not disappear. They continued in roles that saved lives. Mine detection, carrying messages, hauling supplies. Same animal, same war, different mission. One path turned them into tools of sacrifice. The other let them help men come home. The strangest thing about this story is not the explosion. It is the paperwork. Companies, platoons, ranges, feeding schedules, street plans, trucks. A whole military machine built around one impossible idea: that hunger, training, and fear could be aimed under steel. For a moment in World War II, they did not just imagine it. They wrote it into doctrine.